Hello, this is Thomas Witherspoon, K4SWL, and I'm out here at Lake James State Park in the picnic area where I've set up my ICOM IC705 QRP transceiver to do a park activation. I haven't started the activation yet. In fact, I just set the thing up and wanted to take a moment to do a video about some of the basic components of a field radio kit. If you're interested in doing a Parks on the Air activation or a Summits on the Air activation, these are very similar components that you would need for both of those particular activities. One of my viewers, Dale, asked about this earlier today, and since I was coming out to do an activation anyway, I thought I'd just take a moment to shoot a quick video here. So, some of the components that you'll need here. I'm going to start with the antenna, which is kind of the most basic piece of equipment you'll need with a park activation or any kind of field operation or home operation. And I'm using the Chameleon MCOM3 portable antenna, which is a pretty big antenna for a field activation. The radiator, which you can't really see in this video, goes way up into a tree. I've launched it way high into a tree here and is in sort of a V configuration with a resonator that's running straight out into the woods out there. I think the resonator is nearly 30 feet or so. The radiator is about 71 feet long or 73 feet long, so it's very long. It is a random wire antenna, meaning it works a lot of bands, all the way from 160 up to 6 meters, which is the reason why I'm using it. However, it's not natively resonant on any of those bands that I know of. You need some sort of matching device, some sort of antenna tuner in order to make this work with your transceiver. So you have to tune this thing up. I do have resonant antennas primarily between 80, 40, 30 and 20 meters. Those are my favorite bands for field activations, and they're resonant, and all I have to do is launch them in a tree and hook them up to the transceiver. I don't need a tuner at all. In fact, resonant antennas are typically what I use when I'm backpacking. They're just more efficient. They're great for QRP operations, but when I've got the luxury of like a picnic table and a big area over here to deploy, I really love this MCOM3 antenna because it's just so versatile, and I find it works really, really well. Now, to get your antenna up into a tree, you're going to need some sort of launching system. And in the past, what I'd do is use a little piece of fishing line. I'd try to find a nice branch, you know, maybe 30, possibly 40 feet high, and use a weight on the end and launch the fishing line up into the tree. And I've done this for hundreds of field activations. But this year, I invested in an arborist throw line. And this is a sort of a, I guess it's like a poly throw line. Arborists use to get lines up into trees before they start working on them. And I also bought the collapsible, I guess you'd call it like a line management cube. Collapses down and folds up into a triangle. And I love this thing. This has really, really revolutionized how I do field activations, because if I've got the luxury of taking that thing with me into the woods, I'm always able to get a much higher launch into a tree. It's usually more successful in the first go, and I can reuse this line over and over and over again, whereas fishing line eventually just sort of dies on you. If you use the same length of line more than twice, it starts to kink up and it gets brittle, and it can fail on you when you're trying to get it in a tree. And I don't like, I like leaving no trace behind when I do field activations. The site always looks better when I leave it. I pick up any trash around, and certainly no one can tell I've been here. Well, with fishing line before, there have been instances where it's gotten caught up in a tree and I end up leaving like a little piece of fishing line in the tree because I can't get it out. And this never ever happens with the throw line. And in fact, that cube's nice too because I can tie off to the end of it instead of tying off to a tree, and that makes it easy to move it around. So we've got our antenna. We've got a way to get the antenna up into the tree. We also need cable, and in this case, I've just got some coax cable going to the MCOM3 portable, which takes PL259 end on it. And you need to make sure that you bring plenty of cable and adapters. And for backpacking, I like using smaller cables like this one from ABR Cable, who I really like. It tends to be all the cable I have is ABR except for this one. But you need to make sure you bring the right cables with you before you leave, to come out to the field, and you need to make sure you've got all the right adapters. See, this goes from a PL259 to a BNC connector because this ATU requires a BNC, which most of my equipment actually now uses BNCs. So I have plenty of these adapters laying around, so if I forget something, I've got it with me. So make sure you've got your cables and your adapters, and actually you want to set up your entire system at home before you leave your first go, because I can promise you, you'll come out to the field and you'll miss something. Anyway, the next thing, of course, is your transceiver. And in this case, we have the ICOM IC705. I have a wide variety of transceivers I take in the field. Some of them are full coverage, general coverage QRP transceivers like this one. I have the Elecraft KX3 and KX2. And then I have radios like the Elecraft KX1 and that is CW only, and the MTR3B, which is CW only. And the great thing about them is they're really, really small and compact. But they can't do as much as one of these can. These can kind of do everything for you. But the ICOM IC705 does not have an internal antenna tuner, which means for this random wire antenna over here, I've got to be able to match it to my transceiver. And you're going to need some sort of external antenna tuner. And in this case, I'm using the Elecraft T1, which is a phenomenal little antenna tuner. I like it because it's very compact. It works with pretty much any transceiver, because all you do is press and hold this button, and then you key down, and it starts to make your match for you when you just send out a tone, and that's really nice. And I found that it matches things really, really well. It runs on a 9-volt battery, and there's a compartment here on the back for replacing that battery very easily in the field. So I always carry a spare 9-volt battery in my backpack when I'm doing a park activation. I always like to have a backup for everything, because when you do a park activation, the worst thing is to spend, you know, possibly an hour or more traveling to a site and then only finding that you've missed something on the way over. So you never want to go to a site and find out you're missing like one of these adapters to complete your kit, because that is not a good day for anyone. So I've got this in this ATU with me that's powered up. I've got my QRP transceiver. Of course, you need to make sure you bring either your key if you're going to do Morse code, or your mic. In this case, I've got the speaker mic that comes with the 705. And you need to make sure you've got that with you, or your headset. I actually really like carrying also, and I've got them in my pocket right now, a pair of earphones, because I find that when I'm in the field, if it's loud, you know, this is a state park, there are cars that are passing by. If I'm trying to listen to a weak signal here on the radio and I'm using the speaker, sometimes I can't hear it very well. When you put earphones in, you increase your chances of copying that signal, you know, by orders of magnitude. It just kind of isolates everything. Something else that you're going to need is a logbook. And I keep a simple notepad with me when I log contacts, and I put at the top of it the park, the date, and then I put down all of the contacts I make. I log them on paper, even though I'm also logging on I take my tablet with me when I can. If I'm doing a real field activation, you know, I don't necessarily take this tablet with me. I'm not going to hike in someplace for, you know, 4 hours and then pull out a tablet. I'm not going to carry that with me because I don't want it to get hurt. I just take a notepad, and then when you get home, you have to send your logs in to the POTA contact for your region. And this makes it so much easier to just take your logs from the field. It keeps your time, it keeps your call signs and everything organized, and the meter bands you're on, and you just export that ADIF file, and that's pretty much it. So I like using it, but I never trust computers. So I often will take a picture of my screen, and I also keep these paper logs, because the last thing I want to do is do a park activation and somehow lose my logs. I don't want the hunters who, maybe this was a new park for them, I don't want them to miss out on the park. So that's a really simple thing, but it's something you need. You need to always have a logbook and a pen or pencil with you so that you can copy down your call signs. All you need to know is the meter band you're on, the call sign that you worked. You can write down the signal report, and I usually write down the state or province or country that they contacted me from. And I keep track of the time as I go along. Now, the ICOM IC705 does have, like, one really cool thing about it. I was skeptical of it first, but it's worked out really well. is it has a battery pack, and the battery packs are the same kind that are used with ICOM HTs. So this is a small lithium-ion battery pack. You just pop it on the back of it, and it powers this radio. I've used it, it'll only power it at 5 watts when you're using the internal battery or one of the battery packs. But I've used this probably an hour and a half in the field, maybe longer than that. I think almost 2 hours one time at 5 watts, and it still had 40% of its capacity left at the end of that. And I was operating CW when I was doing that particular activation, which is probably a little more power intense. So it works pretty well with a built-in battery, but I also always carry an external battery with me, because sometimes I'll forget to charge this one. And if I do, I want to have an external battery. I'm a huge fan of Bioenno lithium iron phosphate batteries. This is a 6 amp hour battery, and that'll probably take me through an entire day of activating, for all I know. I mean, it's a lot of capacity. Works really well. They're very lightweight, and they're wonderful. And I am a big believer in fusing all of your, I overfuse things if anything. I want to protect this, you know, $1,300 piece of equipment. So if I wanted to hook this up to my battery, I will take the cord that comes with the IC705, which is in my pack right now, but I'll hook it up to the ICOM IC705, run that over here to my power pole distribution panel, which is a small one I built from a kit. And I use the appropriate fuse for it, and then have my battery plugged into that. And that's just a little extra protection, especially if you happen to have a power cord on a different transceiver that doesn't have built-in inline fuses. It's great to have a separate power pole distribution panel, and they're not very expensive. They work really well, and I like them. So those are the basic components of the station in general. There are some other things that you actually need to do a park activation. They're not required, but I almost think they are. One of them is if you are operating phone, if you're doing single sideband and you're doing an activation, it's very, very important that you're spotted on the POTA network. This POTA site, which is at pota.us. And this is the site right now. It's active. It's hooked up to my phone. My phone here at this park has internet access. And so it's using my phone as a hotspot. When I'm ready to operate, I just go up here and I can spot myself. I click on Add Spot. And if I'm doing a phone contact, like I say, I always need to do this. Now, the parks I go to and the game lands I go to, especially in the mountains of North Carolina, I'm often outside of cell phone service. I would say that 60 to 70% of the parks I go to, I have no cell phone service. So I have to plan ahead. If you're doing phone, single sideband, I would suggest that you, first of all, check out and make sure that, you know, if you have internet service at your site or not, or what you think you will, if you'll have mobile internet service. If you don't, get a friend to spot you. Let them know where you'll be. If they can listen for you on the radio, have them listen for you. And that's what's worked for me in the past. I have a friend in Ohio, listens for me. He's usually somewhere in my sort of propagation footprint, and he'll spot me on the POTA network. Once you're spotted, you're good. You'll probably work your required 10 activations to have a valid activation as an activator. Now, if you only work 3 that day, you still want to submit your logs. It's not a valid activation for you, but for the hunter, it counts for their total score. So I always submit my logs. And I've only very, very few times have I not made an activation. Usually that's been because I couldn't be spotted when I was working phone, actually. Now, if you're a CW operator, what you need to do is go to the POTA website, and there's actually a place in here where you can schedule your activation, and you tell them the park number, the time that you're going to be there, and your call sign. And what it does is it uses the reverse beacon network, and when you start calling CQ, I've found that within the first minute it automatically spots you on this network. So that is kind of a secret weapon with Parks on the Air, is to use Morse code, because when you do, as long as you've scheduled yourself and as long as the system's working, and sometimes those things don't happen, but if the system's working, it'll spot you automatically, and that's just such a luxury, you know, with Parks on the Air. But anyway, those are the basic components. I'm going to start my activation now. I've been talking a little too long. If If you've got any questions, feel free to ask, and I'll do my best to answer them. I've done maybe, I guess, all in all, including national parks on the air and parks on the air, I've probably done about 150 or more field activations with various equipment, and I love doing it. I love using different transceivers and different setups and different antennas and different paddles and different batteries. I love experimenting, so I use a little bit of everything. Even in this bag, it's so big, and I didn't have to hike in, so I even brought extra transceivers with me. I've got my MT-R3B in this pack. I've got my Elecraft KX2 in here. I always, if I can, if I'm doing a park activation like this, I'll take an extra transceiver with me just in case something goes wrong. But that's really unnecessary. Most of the time, you've got a good transceiver like this 705, you're going to be, golden. This has been a fantastic radio for park activating, and I've been very, very pleased with it in both single sideband and CW. I have not done digital modes with it yet, but I'm coming up to that soon. Anyway, I better get this park activation started so I can finish up here in time to get home and make some dinner.